Hey everyone, I'm Rebecca M. Krogman, author of the dark epic fantasy Liberation and the Keepers of Midgate. That's a trilogy. I'm going to read a little bit from the very first book for you today. Liberation is part of the SPFBO 10 competition, which is super exciting. And just to give you a little bit of context, the scene that we're coming into, the Prince Raylan is traveling with some of his military to go and relieve some people that are over on the border. And so he's staying at this lord's house and just woke up. So really cliche, but Raylan heard a light rasping and relinquished his dream, letting it fade into nebulous memory. The crescent of the slow second moon had risen, and pale moonlight streamed into the small window above his head. He blinked and yawned, then squinted. Sir Corden stood in the doorway to the children's room. The man's silhouette was distorted. One shoulder hung low, and his head bobbed. His breathing was erratic, making muffled sounds in the back of his throat. The old knight took an uneven step into the room. Raylan struggled against his tight muscles to sit up, feeling that something was off, when Sir Corden turned suddenly to one of the Highguard knights sleeping on a cot. Jonathan, maybe? His glance was so predatory, Raylan froze. Corden fell onto the man and bit his exposed neck, emitting a horrifying, slurping sound, then ripped an entire chunk out. His right hand flashed up and down on the knight's torso. The man screamed, waking the entire house, but Corden had already turned to Raylan. He advanced, ungainly but quick. While Gilead stumbled out of his cot with a cry, Sir Corden clambered onto the bed, jabbing the knife into the thick furs around their legs. Serana was shrieking in terror. Their host crawled spider-legged onto their laps and peered at them, wild-eyed. His white beard dripped with fresh blood, and his eyes were as black as the nether hour. He looked directly at Raylan and cocked his head, then slid his attention to his screaming wife. Sir Corden raised his bloody knife with an elated, toothy smile and brought it down upon Serana. Raylan saw the world slow. Not her. He lunged over her to block the blade and instinctively brought his hands up in self-defense. With all of his will, he denied the reality of what was about to happen. Not her, not his chosen. Time stopped, and the room shuddered as something inside him broke. Power emanated outward like an explosion, an invisible wave that rattled the walls and shattered the glass windows. The blade melted away in the moonlight, and Sir Corden struck Raylan's palm with a closed fist. The knight growled like a feral beast, battering at them even as Gilead thrust a blade into his back. The madman slumped over with a raspy gurgle and fell to the floor, utterly still. Raylan stared at the body and clutched Serana close. Her terrified wailing was muffled in his chest, and he was certain his own heart was going to leap from his chest. The house's chaos drifted to his ears like an avalanche from the mountains. A low rumble, then a concussive sound that slammed into his eardrums. The house was in an uproar. Gilead was shouting commands. Children were screaming. Raylan's guards scoured the house, collecting the servants and Sir Corden's young ones. Patrick emerged from the children's room and informed them that Lady Amber, Corden's wife, was dead in her bed, her throat slit wide. The children were shrieking, and the dogs outside were barking. The entire town would be alerted. Move them away, Father Kayadan commanded with surprising forcefulness. They don't need to see this. The holy mage examined the scene, taking it all in through his blessed eyes. The indigo band painted over his vision would provide clarity, Raylan hoped. Kayadan adjusted his spectacles and knelt over Sir Corden to examine his face. Sir Gilead stammered at the unusual source of authority. But they're traitors. He looked to Raylan for guidance. No, said Kayadan dismissively. Raylan found himself looking to Kayadan to explain. The holy mage had turned over Corden's body. He pointed at the blackened eyes, then indicated the bladeless knife hilt clutched in his stiff hand. With the children gone, the room had gone silent. The madness, Kayadan whispered. The madness was here. A knight by the bedroom door took a step back, but Kaeden stopped him. "Do not worry, it is gone," he said, with far more assuredness than Raylan felt. "However, I beseech you all to be wary on the rest of the journey. This is the first report of the madness so far into Marat." "What madness?" Gilead asked. He looked expectantly at Raylan. "I should have been informed." Patrick nodded his somber agreement. Ronadan sobbed as he examined Jonathan, who was still in his cot. The knight had died quickly, but not without fear. "And what was that pulse of power?" continued Gilead. "It came from you, your highness." Raylan clutched at Serana for grounding. The world he knew spun. Jonathan was dead. Sir Corden was dead. Lady Amber was dead. He looked to Kaeden. "Father?" Corden and Amber's servants were released as Kaeden insisted there was no treachery, and they scattered into the town. The children were retained, and all of Raylan's entourage were assigned to guard the house. Only Kaeden and the 3 Highguard knights remained with Raylan and his trembling wife. "My king, I thank Ea you weren't hurt," Kaeden said, shaking. He knelt by the bed and bowed formally to Raylan. "I saw Ea intervene. Through you. A miracle." Serana sobbed into him, oblivious to their conversation. Raylan shook her, and she looked up at him as he settled her onto the bed. Kaeden, still staring hard at the floor, raised his hands up, revealing the knife hilt. "Do you understand what happened, my son?" Raylan shook his head, and Gilead grumbled, "Get on with it already, Holy Father." Kaeden's voice trembled. "My dear king, you have power from Ea, the power to destroy." He emphasized the knife hilt, "and the reciprocal power to create. You did this." Raylan took the hilt from Kaeden's hands and examined it. The entire blade was missing, as if it had never been. He nearly dropped it. "That's impossible," he said. Kaeden insisted, still refusing to look him in the eye. "Nay, my king, not impossible. The power of external transmutation is rare, but it exists in those of high enough blood, pure enough blood. You, son of House Harkin, are the greatest gift of this generation to Ea, from Ea." The priest lowered himself even farther, touching his nose to the floor. Raylan begged him to get up. Serana was staring at her husband in awe, and he tried to ignore it. Would he ever just belong? "No, my king," said Kaeden, finally relinquishing his bow. "You were not born for such a mundane purpose as belonging. Your gifts should be embraced and used, and I can teach you. I have a good deal of knowledge to share, and anything I don't know, I can help you find." "That explosion was from him?" Gilead repeated, voice gruff with irritation and confusion. Kaeden glanced around the room, at the closed door, and nodded silent verification. He placed a finger to his lips, and stood, and excused himself to check the house again for any signs of madness. "Sleep well, my king. You are a miracle among miracles. It is safe now, for Ea has seen you and your lovely wife through." The High Guard remained, all awake and refusing to even sit, and Raylan tried his best to quiet his racing thoughts and rest. Scene break. They departed Lupine the next day. The streets were empty, and the few townspeople they saw were somber. Kaeden had given them enough information the night before to quell any sedition, and to ensure the villagers knew to inform them of any new disease. The local temple was small, and the mage couldn't whisper, but they had pigeons at least. Kaeden sent a message to Ironhold with minimal detail, as Raylan didn't want the council to demand his immediate return. Father Kaeden reassured him that the madness was gone, although Raylan didn't understand how. Sir Corden's children were left in the hands of Lady Amber's family, who lived nearby. They buried the dead that morning, and Raylan watched the entire process with shame and grief. Somehow, he believed it was his fault, although he could never have known the madness would infect Sir Corden, nor where it had come from. Raylan quickened their pace, trotting the horses out of the town and trying to ignore the red eyes and grim expressions of those mourning. The lord and lady had been well loved. Clenching his jaw, he rode onward. Father Kaiden rode next to him, and Serana's carriage trundled behind, bouncing on ruts and bumps in the poorly maintained road. Yet Raylan was acutely aware of a difference in the party. Patrick led at the front with a number of knights. Gilead followed immediately behind Raylan. His horse's leading hoofs seemed to clop into Raylan's ears and tread on the back of his horses. Gilead's breath was on his neck. Ronadan carried the rear by himself. He was quiet. No winking or brash jokes. No lightening of everyone's mood as he mourned his fallen brother, Jonathan of the High Guard. They would have to promote someone, but neither Raylan nor Gilead had the heart to do so just yet. Something else ate at him, though. Why had he been able to perform some miracle? And why had the windows shattered? I don't understand, Father, he murmured. Kaiden looked at him. Sometimes his will is mysterious, my king, but Ea has revealed something great and holy in you. But how? I was tested by the temple when I was a boy. I had no magic back then. Kaeden's face contorted, and he looked everywhere but at Raylan. He adjusted his glasses once again, and the sweat on his indigo-painted brow made his fingers slightly purple. My king... Raylan stared at him, expectant. My king, I cannot say. He looked as frustrated as Raylan felt. You must, please, Father. How could the temple not know that I had this gift, if it's so powerful? The explosion, Kaeden began, busily rubbing the paint on his fingers off. The outward pulse of power. It woke me and all the others. What was it? Raylan demanded. A break, son, Kaeden finally answered, looking directly at him with a tragic expression. Some sort of ward. Someone placed a magic ward on you, a powerful one. I wasn't aware of it, nor anyone else I know. Wards are invisible once placed. Raylan's mouth went dry. Yet another way his autonomy was controlled. Who would do such a thing? He demanded, feeling the heat rising within. Kaeden shook his head, apparently just as shocked. It would have been someone with incredibly strong magic and extensive training. He paused, his mouth half open and his brows raised. Someone in the temple. Someone trying to control you. And that's the end of that scene. I would love for you guys to check this out. It is part of SPFBO this year. And actually, it's going to be part of a really big fantasy giveaway in, I think, about a week or so. So follow my Instagram, follow my Facebook, follow all the SPFBO posts that are out there, and keep an eye out. This book is definitely going to be available. I want you to read it. I want you to check it out if you like dark and gritty fantasy. I tend to have a lot of those classic tropes mixed in there, but I also have a lot of really non-traditional things thrown in. So like there's some medieval settings. There's also an Asian inspired setting with mermaids. There's also a desert setting. And I just kind of mix all of it together. I really, really love following all these characters through their arcs. And so I have been told that I do a lot of very character-oriented storytelling along with that heavy world building with epic fantasy. So I would love for you to check it out. And it's available to buy at the link on this post as well. So thank you for joining me.